Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on weird and true mysterious stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 1414, written by Ketzeph, the Nocturnal Ballet in the Enchanted Forest. My house was located atop a hill and surrounded by woods. Various trails crisscrossed the woods, each very well maintained and wide. These trails were used by the county hunt, fox hunting, who would ride through every other weekend. My bed overlooked the woods and the trail. One autumn night, I looked out my window while getting ready for bed and saw a pair of lights moving along what appeared to be one of the trails. I instantly thought it was a car or something and wondered how they had managed to get on the trail. The next morning, I asked my neighbor, who said that some kids used to ride ATVs through the woods, creating a horrible racket. I assumed that had been what I saw. Over the next month, more and more pairs of lights appeared, until they would be 7 or 8 pairs going through the woods. I complained to my family about the lights, but as they didn't show up until at least 11 p.m., my parents and siblings were already asleep by the time the lights showed up. About 2 months into this, in roughly October, I could see the lights through my window as normal. I took a second to watch them go by, as they were fewer than normal, only about 4 pairs, and they were keeping very close to each other in a line. As they moved along the ridge of a hill, the front pair of lights split. The further lights stayed in line, but the closest light descended the hill at an incredible speed, all the while keeping pace with its mate. After a moment or so, the other lights began to separate, all the while maintaining equal speeds. This was impossible for any vehicle. The hill was covered with trees. After separating, some of the pairs rejoined, while the others began to fall out of sync and move around each other. I was in shock. The next morning, I immediately told my family. I was quite shaken by the event, but my family didn't believe me. As the lights continued to appear every other night, I continued to tell my family to no avail. I even tried recording them on my phone, but it did not have sufficient detail to catch the lights. It could catch a glimpse here or there, but no movement from my room. I was not willing to actually go outside and try to get closer. I eventually accepted that the lights were just there, and actually enjoyed watching them. They began appearing slightly less frequently. By the time the trees had regained their leaves, I was unable to really see them at all, save for the occasional light moving through a break in the trees. I had also stopped mentioning the lights to my family. A few months later, my mom was returning home very late, around midnight, from an event. To not wake our dogs, she turned off the car headlights. As she moved up the driveway in the dark, she immediately saw what she described as 2 flashlights at the top of the driveway. She immediately stopped the car, terrified that people were trying to break into the house. She turned off the engine, hoping she hadn't been seen. The 2 lights moved cautiously down the driveway, to either side of the car. They moved too fast and smoothly to have been carried. As she looked out of the window, one light was only 2 or 3 feet away from the window. She thought the lights had moved to investigate the car. She described each light as about a foot wide. She instantly thought it must be some kind of bug, like some type of giant firefly. She lowered her window to get a better look, but there was no body to the light. The light also produced no sound. After 4 or 5 seconds, the pair of lights instantly moved at an incredible speed away from the car, traveling to a neighboring field. A few moments later, they disappeared back into the woods. The next morning, my mother was terrified and she told me her story. I instantly explained that it was exactly what I had been seeing, the lights in the woods. As I described my experience more, and she kept relaying hers, she quickly understood that whatever she had seen must have been what I had been seeing. My mom apologized for not believing me, but she remained disturbed by what she had seen. After that event, I only saw the lights a few more times. By the next fall, the lights had vanished completely. To this day, I have no idea what they were, and my mother and I have no natural explanation for their behavior. Having watched them at length, I can say their movements were not erratic or random. They moved apparently and deliberately along the paths. until they began moving down and through the hills inexplicably. Even when leaving the path, they moved in what appeared to be coordinated paths, almost like a dance. Despite the plethora of trees along the woods, they never appeared to collide with anything. Instead, they moved deftly around and through any potential obstacle. I sincerely wish I had a better phone at the time. The few videos I took on my Razr flip phone, this was back in 2005 or 2006, were so grainy and unusable that I didn't bother to remove them from my phone when I later changed to an iPhone. I'm not even sure I had the know-how to remove the videos at the time. As a final note on this rambling story, my mother later asked my neighbor about the ATV riders who used to go through the woods. He informed her that the kids who had been ATV riders had done that roughly 15 years ago. The kids had grown, their parents had sold their house, and he hadn't seen an ATV on the path for a decade. Ketzeph 1414, the Nocturnal Ballet in the Enchanted Forest. So I agree this is not ATV riders, no. Spiritual orbs, or ball lightning as it is conventionally known, perhaps. Wandering spirits, or their pure energy not yet manifested, making their way onward would be the best word, I guess. The fragments left behind don't linger forever. If they did, we'd be inundated with spirits every few feet. Think about how many humans have lived throughout all of human history, over 100 billion. If all of them, who are now dead or passed on, lingered behind, well, there would be a spirit literally every inch. You wouldn't be able to move without going through a cold spot. No. Clearly, most spirits move on, or most fragments, and of course this isn't not even talking about quantum immortality, but I think even then, there's fragments left behind, but those fragments don't linger on forever, that's for sure. I think there are ways they can siphon energy, spiritual energy from the living, but usually they don't, and eventually they fade after maybe a few years, a decade or two, something like that. And now time for the quote of the day. Imagination is more important than knowledge. Albert Einstein. Well, it's kind of like Vulcans in Star Trek, where they have extremely high knowledge and intelligence, but they're not particularly creative. They don't have much drive to push the boundaries. So even if you know all the knowledge there is to know, that's only the base layer. You have to know what to do with that knowledge. And if you have no burning spark to take that knowledge and manipulate it and use it to further your ends and the ends of humanity, well, it's not going to do much for you. So yes, imagination coupled with knowledge is the key. Knowledge is almost like the ingredients, and then imagination is the cooking process and how creative you can get in the kitchen. So get to cooking. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.